Aloha and welcome back. Today's card I'm going to be using Spellbinders Stamp and Die template set, the chrysanthemum. I just got this actually from an online order I had just made. The back part, it shows you a little example of how to do the coloring on the flower and leaf. I'm going to be using some watercolor cardstock. I'm going to use the textured, like really textured side of the cardstock. Watercolor cardstock has a really smooth side and then a really textured side. So I wanted to use the textured to give it a little bit of texture on the pieces here. So the stamps are rubber, and to use it in my Misty, I need to remove the foam in the back. And I'm placing the two stamps on my cardstock here in my Misty, and then I'm going to ink it up with some Versamark ink and close the lid and stamp that onto my watercolor cardstock. I'm going to do it a couple of times because it's so textured. You want to make sure that you get ink into every little, nook and cranny in that cardstock. And I also do want to mention that I don't know if you noticed, but I did forget to use, prep my surface with some powder. So I did have some stray black embossing powder, but you can just take a skinny paintbrush for that and get all the unwanted powder off of your cardstock. So here I'm going in and making sure I prep my surface. Stamping the two stamps again with the Versamark onto my watercolor cardstock. And then using my heat tool, I'm going to heat set the black embossing powder. I do keep my heat tool on the side on while I'm doing my stamping, just to make sure that it's nice and hot when I bring it to my cardstock, just to limit the amount of warping that goes on with the heat tool. Pulling out my Zig Cling color brush pens. I want to do a watercolor on this floral piece. So pulling out 2 shades of pink, and then I'm also going to pull out 2 shades of green. Here we go. And also a aqua pen, and you can use either a paintbrush and some clean water. And I also taped down my cardstock because there was a little bit of warping going on, and I just wanted to make sure that it stayed down while I was coloring. So taking the light pink color, I'm going to be concentrating the color in the middle of the flower there, and then using my aqua pen to blend the color out a little bit. And here I am deciding that I need to add a little bit more light pink. Okay. And I'm going to go in with the darker shade of pink. And I'm going to be coloring around the outsides of the flower here. Not taking too much care really to color in all of the pieces of the flower, just basically trying to lay down some color, because I'm going to take my aqua pen there and move the color around, and it'll get the color into every area that I missed. So here, just blending the colors onto the flower using my aqua pen here. And you do notice that I am squeezing the barrel of the aqua pen from time to time, just to make sure I have a nice flow of water coming through my aqua pen. So once I get all of the outsides here nice and blended out, I'm gonna go into the center and blend those 2 pink colors together so that you're not going to be able to see that harsh line that's going on right now between the two colors. And I do always keep a rag handy, and that's why you see my hand going off screen. My rag always sits on my lap, and I always want to clean off the brush. You don't want too much contamination from the darker color into the lighter color, because it'll just take away the whole depth of the flower there. Okay, and then here I'm gonna move on to the leaves. Now I did make a big boo-boo and color that one flower on the left hand side, and I just really didn't like it, so I'm gonna get rid of it. But I'm using the olive green and the light green color. So there you see I have gotten rid of the flower that I did not color nicely at all. Applying the light green to the bottom part of all the leaves, the part of the leaves closest to the stem, I'm gonna apply the light green, and then apply the olive green to the tips of the leaves there. And some people prefer to do it the opposite, and I usually do put the darker green or darker color towards the center for leaves, and then have the lighter colors coming more towards the tips of the leaves. But for some reason I just want it to go this way, so that's the way I went. And just blending out between the two greens, making sure there's a nice smooth transition between the two colors on each leaf there. And there's like little leaves, barely can see the transition there between the two colors on the little leaves, but definitely on these bigger leaves here you can see the transition. So I'm gonna do the same exact thing on the other set of leaves there. I'm gonna take the die cut and cut out my floral piece there. Beautiful, I love it. Okay, so I wanted to just leave this part in. This is me going through the process of figuring out how I'm gonna put my card together. So taking this cardstock from last month's card kit from Simon Says Stamp, I'm just going through it to see what, cardstock I can use for this card. And I think I'm kind of liking this pink diagonal stripe cardstock here. And so on my desk, where you can't see, but to the left, I always have like random word die cuts that I just tried to use on a different card and just didn't come together. So I have this like gold thanks die cut, and I wanted to make this card for one of my best friends. She sent some stuff to me in the mail recently, and I just wanted to send her a little thank you card in the mail. So here I'm trying to decide how I'm gonna put this thing on a card. So I decided to cut it down to 2 3/4 of an inch, and I did decide on craft for my card base, and taking some adhesive, I'm gonna apply that to my card base. And just trying to put that as much in the center as I possibly can. And then I'm going to trim off the excess there on the side. And I don't know if you can see, but there's like a little smudge on the bottom right. So I'm really going to concentrate to put my flower and my leaves in that area so I can cover that little smudge. I actually don't know how that smudge got there, but it's there, so I just needed to cover it up. Now at this point, trying to figure out the composition of how I'm going to put the leaves in the flower, and it's always good, you know, you can always cut off the parts that are going to be hidden underneath another, you know, piece of cardstock or a die cut. You can always cut it off just so you don't have all that excess just hanging out and blocking you from, you know, putting the card together. So I pretty much like this here, this little layout. I love it. I love the way it looks. And so I'm gonna figure out where I want to put the thanks. And looks pretty good. So at this point I'm just going to remove the bottom layers, add some liquid adhesive, and then stick them back where I had them. All right there is good. Apply some pressure just to hold it down, to keep it down. And I'm going to grab the other leaves and apply some liquid adhesive on that as well. And I did, when I put this on, the leaf overlapped the flower, and I really love that. It just, I don't know, it made it so nice that it just overlapped the flower just a bit. And at this point I was struggling, should I pop up the flower piece on, you know, foam tape, or should I just put it directly on the card? And so because I like that leaf going over the petal of the flower, I decided to just mount it with some adhesive to the card. And here I'm going to take this thanks die cut, add some liquid adhesive to the back, and then add that to my card with my tweezers. Now, without getting my head like right over the card, without blocking, you know, the view of the camera, it's really hard to get that word on straight. So it is a little crooked, but I do notice it. So I'm going to fix it just a bit. And it's a good thing about liquid adhesive, right? And I put some acrylic block just to hold it down to make sure that it sticks. So at this point, I don't know if, I'm sure you don't see it, but alongside that T, there's a smudge from the glue, the liquid adhesive. So I found the gold thickers from the card kit from last month, which Simon Says Stamp. And I found these little leaves that kind of match the leaves that I had already watercolored. So I'm just going to stick that alongside the T, and I'm applying very light pressure so that if I do change my mind, I can just pull it right up. And because I had done this as an afterthought, everything's basically stuck down. So I just had to find a little spot under that flower to stick my gold leaves there. And that I loved. I was like, wow, this card is good, it's done. And then I noticed that there's 4 leaf sprigs, and in the world of crafting, you know, odds is always better. So the only thing they had was this wreath looking one on the thickers, and so I just decided to cut it apart. Why not? So here I'm just cutting like a little sprig, and I'm gonna add it to the bottom there. So trying to lift up the corner as best as I can and stick that bad boy right in underneath that flower. And so at this point, okay, I like it, it looks good. So then I'm gonna apply some pressure and stick that down. And this is pretty much the card. I didn't get any still shots, but Mahalo for watching, and we'll catch you next time.